I'm Joel H. Brewster, and I'm no stranger to horror. And this is a podcast where I discuss the big and the small of the genre with the hopes of taking you from being a casual horror fan to a person like me who's a horror film fanatic. Today, I'll be discussing the film The Autopsy of Jane Doe from 2016 from director Andre Overdahl. Apologies, Andre. And with me today, I have a childhood friend who I just found out I haven't spoken to verbally in like 20 years, Danica Turcotte, and she has a very interesting background that ties somewhat to the movie. Danica, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How have you been? We've kind of caught up a little before, but just like, what's been going on?
So much.
20 years, so yeah.
Exactly. No, life's good. Life's good. It's gone some places that I didn't expect, and it's been good. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so Danica and I grew up in a very small town in British Columbia called Souk. And Danica's since moved away. I'm still on the island, not in Souk anymore, but we've been somewhat in contact through social media. And which brings today's very interesting meeting of horror and a profession that somewhat Danica used to, well, similar to the movie, which we'll get into. Danica, just can you explain what the profession I'm talking about is?
I went to college and apprenticed as a funeral director and embalmer.
It's a really interesting world there. What interests you to go into that?
Oh gosh. You know what? There's a lot of levels to it, honestly. As ever since I was a kid, I had sort of, like, I'll confess to a morbid curiosity. I used to sneak into my dad's first aid manuals and look at the pictures and stuff. And I was always fascinated by sort of how the body worked and honestly gore, that kind of thing. But as I grew older, what really sort of cemented my interest in the profession was more of the service to people aspect of it. It's a job that has to be done. It's a job that not everyone can do. And I felt really passionate about sort of the respect and the honor that goes hand in hand with it. So in the end, it was a pretty cool blend. And I was, really satisfied in that position.
Yeah, it's a very interesting world to be in. And I feel like it's not one that's I hear too much about. So I was always really interested to talk to you in more detail about that. You're no longer in the profession, is that correct?
No, unfortunately, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness a few years back. And because I was working for a rural funeral home, the way that our job would work is that it's truly sort of 24/7, 365. In bigger metropolitan areas, there will be, different professionals that will do different parts of the job. There will be transfer services and, there people who will pick up a decedent from their home, etc. But when you're more rural, you sort of do everything. We go into people's homes and pick up bodies. We'll go to motor vehicle crash sites, that kind of thing. So it can be, 4:00 in the morning, etc. And with me being ill, I just could not provide that sort of flexibility as staff. So unfortunately, I had to leave that profession, but it's definitely something that I will always miss and hope to go back to someday.
Yeah, it's definitely, wow, that sounds like a lot of work, especially the hours that you just mentioned there and just not knowing what could happen.
Exactly. Yeah, pretty unpredictable, but I miss it. I miss it a lot. Right now I'm working at a public library, actually. So another side of me that I get to do my sort of passion too.
That's really cool because a lot of people don't get to go into anything that they're passionate about. And I know you're really passionate about reading, and obviously you're passionate about the service you're doing previous. So it's cool you got to go from one passion to another.
Exactly. I feel really blessed that way, for sure. Yeah. Two very, very different jobs.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm assuming both would have a lot of reading. So there's that one connection.
Yeah. Probably more doing the funeral directing and embalming, less so at the library, surprisingly enough.
That would make sense. Well, yeah, I guess that checks out.
Mm-hmm.
So just for those unfamiliar, what exactly would an embalmer do? Like once they've received a decedent, which is a word that I'd never really heard before. So
it's one of the professional terms. Yeah. It really depends on the situation. I think that one thing that I would certainly want to, maybe enlighten any of your listeners who aren't aware, that you have so many options when a loved one passes away. You have so many options. You don't have to have that person embalmed. You can cremate. You can have a viewing without embalming. You can have a viewing with embalming and then cremate. I think that when people die, we get so swept up, obviously, in the trauma of the situation that we're not necessarily sitting down and exploring, oh, what can I do? What are my options? So it really varies. It varies immensely from case to case what you would actually do. But the majority of people that I was caring for were elderly. They, had died of old age, were coming from a hospital or a care home. And the basics are that you clean them really well. Set features, which is a term for basically the things that we do to a person's face to make them look like themselves. What else is there? And then embalming, the actual act of embalming is preserving the body with chemicals via the circulatory system is sort of the basics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that your insight into like the world, I'd say like death in general too, because like you said, there are a lot of people do get really swept up, as one does with any big event, whether it is like a new life or a passing. And I feel like I completely agree with you that like once you're swept up, people don't really think of their options as much. But it's a world that I've always been interested in on how it works and like what a day-to-day would be like. But
I would really encourage anyone that's interested to research it. There's some amazing resources out there. Number one, for sure, I would say that there's a girl, Caitlin Dowdy. She has a YouTube channel called Ask a Mortician, and she's phenomenal. She's phenomenal the way that she talks so casually and what would the word for it be? She's just a really friendly, warm person in the trade who's so honest, and she's been definitely a boon for people learning about that part of our life, because that's what it is, right? It's part of life.
Mm-hmm. I'll definitely put that name, Caitlin Dowdy. Was it? I'll put that in the show notes. So I really want to check that out myself.
Oh, absolutely.
So I have to ask, with the connection to a horror movie, did you ever have any like ghostly sort of moments? I know it's kind of an unprofessional question, but I'm just curious if there was anything that was in lieu of that. Obviously nothing like the movie, but just like, was there any like a gust of wind sort of happened that scared you?
You know what? I did have something that was like the movie.
Ooh.
But, but in a different way. So I'm a skeptic. I'm not someone who goes into situations expecting any kind of supernatural experience to come of it. But there was one instance that I actually took a lot of comfort from, where I had been, I was caring for an infant. I think the child was less than a month old.
Wow.
And we were preparing the baby so that their family could have the time they needed to really, say the farewell that they deserved. So anyway, once I had reached a certain stage of the process, I needed to just leave things sit for a little while, go upstairs, do some paperwork, and I was going to be returning within probably an hour or two or so. And when I came back downstairs, I'm 100% sure I turned off the lights and I turned off the stereo, because we do have music playing, just a radio in the prep room there. When I went downstairs, the radio was on again. There was a light on that I had turned off, and the radio was actually on a CBC radio classical station. And my first thought was that it was, like you would turn on a nightlight and put on lullabies for your baby kind of thing. It was just, I don't know what happened exactly. Probably nothing, probably just a coincidence, but that's the closest sort of eerie experience that I had. But it was a really nice one, honestly.
Yeah, it sounds really nice, but at the same time, wow, what a connection to the movie. It's just like really similar to the movie.
Yeah. As soon as the radio started acting funny, I was like, oh, okay, well, that happens to other people too.
With the actual movie itself, was there anything when you were watching that you're just like, oh, that's not accurate? Or was there stuff in it that you're watching like, oh, that actually is like really a good way of showing the process?
There was definitely some stuff that was sort of like, oh, that's not how that happens. But I understand why it's done like that. Like any TV show, any movie that you're going to see, Autopsy or a morgue, that kind of thing, no one's ever wearing masks. And it drives me nuts. I get it, because you want to see your actors' faces. Yep. There's a verbal issue with being able to hear them properly. But absolutely, the PPE, which is the personal protective equipment, is like the rule of thumb is that no skin is to be exposed anywhere on your body.
Wow. So, yeah, they always seem to get that wrong in movies.
Yeah. And that's, that's such a, it's kind of just an expected normal thing for TV and movies that it's hardly even I'm not going to quibble with it too much. But yeah, like you'd be wearing, let me think, gloves, booties to protect your shoes, like a non-permeable apron, because any clothing that you wear, you don't want to walk out of your workplace after and have, bodily fluids or anything like that on yourself. So you wear an apron, goggles, and a shield. I used to wear a hair covering, and then masks. For myself as an embalmer, because we work so much with like formaldehyde-based chemicals and fluids, we would have to have an N95 rating, which, global climate right now, we're all pretty aware of the different mask options. Yeah. So the N95 was sort of the go-to. You had to have that as a standard.
Yeah. Well, another thing, I'm assuming there was no cats allowed like in this movie?
No, we didn't have any cats in our prep room. But, yeah, there was just little things like that. They did get some of it right, though. Like the scene with the rib cutters was interesting. That's something that's part of an autopsy. I've never been present for an autopsy. I've prepared a body that was autopsied. So we get sort of, the aftermath of that procedure. And I can tell you more about that. I haven't been at an autopsy, but the ribs are cut, the sternum is removed, just like they showed. They'll cut into the cranium and lay back the scalp and remove the brain. All of that is, pretty super accurate. It's interesting though, the blade that they use, or the machine that they use to open the cranium, is it's not actually like an oscillating blade. It vibrates. And so the way that it cuts is that it has to be against something hard like bone. As soon as it's up against, say you could touch it with your hand and it wouldn't cut you, because anything with anything with give, the vibration doesn't go through. I'm not sure how to explain it, but it's not like a saw, which is kind of, I always thought that was sort of neat.
Yeah. So, that's actually, that's wild. That makes sense though, because you don't want to be obviously cutting yourself with that, but that makes sense how it would work.
Yeah. Yeah. Or cutting into the brain, right? Because the skull isn't consistent.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. I like this movie. Even I think I've seen it 3 times now. I was trying to discuss it with my wife how many times I've seen it. Because I remember I watched it once with my dad, then once with my wife, and then obviously this time for the podcast. And I feel that one of my favorite things about this, and it kind of correlates to what you were just saying about the process in itself, is that they told the entire story of the titular character Jane Doe through her whole story through the autopsy. And I thought that was interesting, of like just finding out her story with no flashbacks, nothing like that. It was just solely told through the autopsy. We found out more about the character.
Yeah, it was entirely on upon discovery sort of thing. I noticed that too. It was really interesting.
Yeah, I was just going to follow that up with, and I love the kind of the ghostly witchy theme that kind of went with it. It was like a little mix of both, and I thought that was really cool too.
Yeah, that's definitely another one of my super interests is the history of witches and treatment of women that were called witches, and yeah, that was really cool. It was neat.
Oh, I knew both those things. That's why this combination. I told you before this. That's why I like this combination of you being involving this movie and like the witchy aspect. I truly mean this when I say that you were in my mind for this exact podcast episode for a very long time. Like when I first did the podcast, I think I can think in my head of there's 3 people that I can think of in my head that I was like, oh, this person for this podcast has been part of my podcast plan for a while. And I could honestly tell you, and I'm okay with everyone knowing this as far as how this podcast works. But it was my podcast episode number 2 with Brittany Marbley from The Purge. I was like, oh, I really got to get her on the show. And my friend Nee, who was in The Watchmen, worked with Zack Snyder and the Dawn of the Dead. That episode, and then this one, I was like, okay, this is these are my 3 I need to go, or every other podcast episode I'm excited to get to, but those were I had in my head for a while because I thought the combination of all the things really worked. So
cool, thank you. Yeah. Well, thanks. I'm taking that all as such a compliment.
Yeah, I've been thinking about you for a while for this episode. I truly have. I didn't know that we hadn't spoken verbally in 20 years, though. I was like, it's been about, my math is that bad. I was like, it's been about 13 years, which is still a long time, but
yeah.
You said even 20. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. It's wild. Goes by fast.
It truly does. Truly does. Speaking of time in general, it's a really weird segue, but speaking of time in general, the character of Jane Doe, played by Olwen Kelly is her name, the actor's name, had to lie on that slab for 8 hours a day for 5 weeks straight.
That's phenomenal. I looked her up a bit, and I read an interview where she was talking about how she, really was working on meditation and even yoga before she went into this project. And yeah, absolutely. I can imagine. I mean, personally, I would have gotten panicky trying to lay still that long, but kudos to her. That was pretty incredible.
Yeah, and it's interesting what she said about the industry too. One thing that I kind of caught in her IMDb, like when she mentioned this, is that she had to really she was laying naked, right? She was laying naked in front of a group of men. Like we're talking the directors, the actor, the crew. I'm assuming too, for multiple weeks, and just for 8 hours a day, and hoping it's a very professional set. But with that said, she said that her comfortable, how she was able to kind of center herself with that was because of her modeling background.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she said, I mean, she certainly comes across as someone who is pretty comfortable in her own skin, but even so, that's such a unique situation to be in, just sort of on display, quite literally, like that for so long. Yeah, I really admire that. Yeah. I saw a lot of there was a lot of conversation online about, she should be, nominated for an award, and then she did win an award. I couldn't find anything that confirmed that she won an award for that, but I felt like there was such subtle changes to her facial expression at some points. It was just, I'm just really, really impressed with her contribution to the movie.
Yeah, I agree. She did so much with so little. It was like it was like a fraction of an inch of her face moving, and it was told such a story. And just everything about her was, I feel like there was like no one else could like play that role of doing like this stillness, and she was just like the perfect character for it. And yeah, it's interesting to talk about a character that had no lines, didn't move, but stole the show.
Yeah, really. Well, I know that I'm not sure if it would be, I don't know the situation for this director, for Andre, if he does the casting or if he has someone do the casting. But I know that when she went in for her audition, she said that she basically looked identical to sort of the idea of who they had, even with her diastema, the tooth gap, like all of it. So she really stepped into a role that was sort of made for her.
Wow. I did hear that when she went for this role, she was the first person to read for the role, and then after that, they did other people, but it was always going to be her, according to the director. They knocked it out of the park, and it was his first English language film too. I'm not sure if you saw that, but I thought that was really interesting. He saw The Conjuring, and then he was just like, you know what, I want to make a horror movie.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I'm really wanting to watch his 2010 Troll Hunter.
I did see that actually. That was I saw it it's weird saying I saw that in theaters when I was in England for like a visit. Yeah. And it's weird. I didn't really think of where I saw it until right now, but yeah, I saw it when I went to theaters there, and I enjoyed it. Like it was good, but I'd love to rewatch it now, actually.
Yeah, I'd like to track it down. And I read very exciting news. I'm hoping that it follows through, but apparently he's directing an adaptation of The Long Walk. I don't know if you're familiar with that novella.
I'm not, no.
It says, or it's presented as the author being Richard Bachman, but Richard Bachman is a sneaky pen name of Stephen King. So it's actually a Stephen King piece. And the story is, now I've read it a couple years ago. I'm going to have to try and remember it, but basically it's these young men, and they have to go on a walk, and the person who, or the boy who can walk the furthest wins. Sort of his life is set. He's set for life. He gets whatever he wants for the rest of his life. And they get so many warnings within an hour if they stop or fall, stumble, that kind of thing. And if they fall, all those things that if they stop, they get shot. So
oh wow.
It's an intense story. It's a quick one. It's just a novella. I'm not even sure if it's 100 pages, but it's pretty phenomenal. I really enjoyed it. Recommend it. But yeah, it would come up under Stephen Bachman, but it's written by Stephen King. Or sorry, Richard Bachman. But written by Stephen King. Yeah.
Awesome. I definitely will check that out. It sounds really cool.
Yeah. So yeah, apparently he's directing. The Long Walk, and I think that'll be great.
Do you think they'll translate to a feature film because it being such a short story in that sense?
I think so. I think that they could pull a lot out of it. I mean, with the character development, they could stretch it out quite a bit, right? He can go into boys' histories and why are they on the walk and all that stuff. So I would imagine you could get a movie out of it.
And the thing is too, I think he's perfectly set for this because Stephen King really loved this movie, number one, which was really cool that Stephen King like stated that he really loved this movie compared it to like early like Cronenberg's work and Alien as well. But I think that why Andre Overall is really good for this is that he was able to stretch a movie like Autopsy of Jane Doe, which you'd think of an autopsy scene in a horror movie with only like 3 people realistically. Like he was able to stretch that out to be a very like captivating hour and a half movie. So I feel like he might be well suited for this Long Walk. Yeah,
that's true. Actually, now that I'm thinking of it, it's not even as though, there's a lot of filler with sort of outside of the autopsy room and the elevator, all that stuff. It's really quite centralized in that one room. That is impressive.
Yeah, and it was a really good father and son story, which I liked, and I don't. And it was a generational father and son story that I find fascinating. It's one of the things my wife and I always talk about is just men of a certain generation. It's of the they get hurt and say I'm fine, and I'm like it's really funny how much I'm not that guy. Like I get hurt. Like, Jenny, you won't believe it. I hurt my arm. She's like, all right, you could just be a little quieter about it. So I thought it was really funny to watch this story of a man, like that older generation of like, I'm fine. I don't need to like be checked out or something like that. Like, man, I am not going to be that guy.
The stiff upper lip. Yeah. Their relationship was it was nice to see what seemed to be a pretty healthy family relationship, actually, because I feel like in horror, they sort of lean on like, oh, there's tension between the mom and the husband and all this, right? Like there's always some weird family stuff going on. But here they were just cared about each other. It was nice. Nice change of pace.
Yeah, you could tell they like generally really loved each other, and they were and even the character of Austin wanting or kind of wanting to leave the profession and everything like that. But the way that the thing about him wanting to leave the profession seemed more to do with the fact that he didn't want to leave. Like his father was like his best friend in a sense. He's like, yeah, I'll tell him. But and then like he ended up ditching his girlfriend to go. Like he's like, I got to go back to work. I'm sorry. Like this is a big thing. And I thought that was really cool. I like that. I really like the relationship.
Yeah, I agree. That's what did you think of the girlfriend? What was her name? Emma.
Yeah. I thought that opening scene, like it's not opening scene, but the earlier scene with her, I would have liked to see a little more of her throughout the movie. But I thought that I have my horror pet peeves about the situation about her getting killed. I'm sure you've heard the term fridging before. If not,
I haven't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you'll definitely I think you'll appreciate this term / recognize it. So fridging is a term that refers to any time a woman is killed to further a man's story. And it actually has a history coming back from a Green Lantern comic where Green Lantern Kyle Rayner, I think there's a lot of Green Lanterns, so please don't kill me in my comment section here about this, but I believe it's Green Lantern Kyle Rayner comes home and a supervillain named Major Force folds his girlfriend and puts her in a fridge. And it didn't really serve much of the story past that. So yeah, fridging. It's one of those things. It's a trope now that I see in horror, and I watch a lot of horror that just it's not even that like it bothers me as a person that like that considers himself feminist. It bothers me in the sense that it's just so hacky that I'm like, come on. So
yeah. That makes me think of the Bechdel test. Have you heard of the Bechdel test?
Yes.
Yeah. We're sort of like, well, did she die? Did they talk about something besides a man?
I watch for it every movie now. Like it's really one of those things. Like I said, like it's separating myself as like who I am, like what I stand for ideally, and then like separating myself as a writer. I think on both fronts, it just really bothers me.
Yeah. No matter where you stand on, human equality, that kind of thing, you can acknowledge just lazy writing.
Yeah, and I always just say, I'm like, come on, like it just really. So yeah, there on that sense, I had to kind of shut my brain off in that term. Yeah, in that term. But the whole thing was yeah, I really shot a brain off in that aspect, especially because I feel like lately I've been watching a lot of stuff that doesn't cater towards that. But I really enjoyed the movie, but yeah, that was one of those things that bothered me. So, do you have thoughts on the girlfriend as well?
Oh, she drove me nuts.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know what it was exactly. I suspect what the issue is, but just immediately she was just under my skin. I think she was very glib about seeing one of the dead bodies. Very like, I'm not like other girls kind of thing. And that always gets to me when it's sort of, I'm different, I'm cool, I'm tough, that sort of thing. It's like, well, it's okay not to be those things too, right? You can be cool and also squeamish, that kind of thing. She just irked me. I don't know what it was. And I think maybe part of it was also I felt that she was really, I don't know. I've never been in this situation, so I probably shouldn't speak to her, this character's experience, but I didn't like how she treated Austin when he was having second thoughts about leaving the business and leaving his dad behind.
No, me neither. I really didn't like that. And to go back to your earlier point too, I thought it was unbelievable that someone would want to see someone's face that had just been caved in like that. I thought that was just couldn't have been faker, because there's no one, regardless of gender, who wants to see a face caved in like that. You'd have to, like, I feel like that's a really intense thing to be seeing in an unprofessional. Do you know what I mean? Like unless you're in a professional situation, but like I don't think I'd want to rip off that Band-Aid, if you will. Like
no, yeah, no, absolutely. There's I think that a level of curiosity is healthy, but it was just, there was just some sort of, it was like an edge of disrespect or something. And I might be being, I don't know, I might be taking that too seriously and being sort of high and mighty. I'm not sure. It's my own personal feelings and values that I brought to that job, really. But it's not, they're not for display. It's not a museum or a zoo, right? Like it's just somebody's loved one.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah.
Or I don't know about loved, because I think that particular character was suspected that maybe they were not loved.
Well, yeah. And it was, that was just one of those things with the girlfriend character that it's interesting, because especially the fridging moment for her later in the film really it didn't make sense to me, to be honest. How did she get in? The elevator was supposed to be down. A lot of that they didn't hear the elevator come down. Then she was there.
Now I read someone had a bit of a theory about that. And they may be reading a little too far into some details, but they were talking about how later on there's only 2 bodies being removed from the house, and that may imply that was part of the illusion that Jane was sort of setting up, was that maybe the girlfriend was not killed.
I thought that too. I thought there was only 2 bodies too. And I was like, I feel like there was only 2 bodies there. I was like, but like they never really went back and went, there's no body there. So I thought that too. And I thought I was going crazy. I was like, there's only 2 bodies, but
yeah. I thought I didn't notice how many bodies came out of it, but I did wonder, because everything else was an illusion. I mean, there was no tree, there was no storm, everything was not really happening.
I love that aspect. Actually, I really like that aspect of showing that it's like forced. Like they did a lot with a lot of storytelling through the radio, and I really like that.
Yeah, that was really cool. That song choice was phenomenal. It was very so good.
Very, very good. As a fan of witchy films, have you seen the movie The Wretched?
I haven't.
Oh, I recommend it. It's a witchy film that I think obviously you follow my social media, and I've been doing like double features and for double features and different things to watch for the month of October. And I felt like this movie and The Wretched went together really well on the whole witch sort of vibe. So I think you'd like that.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
As would listeners. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I have to confess, I don't watch as many horror movies as I would like to. I read a lot of horror novels, but I don't get around to as many movies as I'd like. So I'll put that at the top of my list.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. It's a lot now. There's a lot of content coming out. And as I've gotten into this, as I've gotten with the West Coast Strange, I've made some friends in the horror community, and they've just been sending me, they're like, oh, you should see this movie. And I'm like, oh man, I thought I watched a lot of horror movies. And then like I meet other horror content creators. I'm like, I am not watching any horror. Like I'm not watching enough. Like, so it's been, so it's always it's a weird analogy to use, but I was gonna say there's always a bigger fish. Like you're saying that you don't like watch too much. I'm like, me neither, apparently. Compared to like
somebody somebody watches even less than us, and somebody watches a lot more.
yeah.
You know what I did? This was a little trivia thing that I loved was back to the girlfriend. I couldn't place her. I knew I recognized her and I could not place her. And I finally figured out what she's from. She's in Guardians of the Galaxy. She's a servant. She's the servant girl for the collector.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
She's pink, and she wears white. Yeah. That's who that is.
Yeah, with when they get what stone is that? Is that in the room when they die with the?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, she's that girl.
The power stone. Oh, that's really wild. I didn't. That's so weird.
Yeah, it was bugging me. I couldn't figure out where it was. I had to do some hunting.
Yeah, I'm like looking at her picture right now, and I was like, and I kind of was thinking that too when I'm staring at her picture. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
It was a weird one. I never would have made the connection without actually looking it up for sure.
No, definitely wouldn't. And I'm not sure if I brought this up yet, but I thought that as much as I didn't like her death scene, but like I found like the reaction from both the father and son, the different guilts on both of them was really well played. And I thought that scene was like I said, as much as I don't like the whole Phrygian concept, I really did like that scene and the reaction to it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I actually really appreciated that. It didn't throw, especially Austin, it didn't throw him off his survival path. Like it didn't just nullify any of his drive to get the hell out of there, because I feel like a lot of the time people will get sort of like, okay, leave them behind now. They're gone. Like, just go. You have to keep going. And they did. They went back in the elevator and they carried on with their attempted escape. But yeah, it was okay. It was okay.
Yeah.
I feel bad for Tommy there. He was, trying to save his kid and be the hero, and he ends up doing something horrible.
Yeah. His journey throughout the movie, I thought, was the most interesting. He really, I thought, kind of broke a lot of the tropes as far as like the grizzled father in it, because you saw earlier that he was a little bit funny when he was doing when he was scaring Emma's character, and he was just really caring, and he kind of really saw that his son had like his son needed a little nudge as far as like professionally, and I saw that too. So I thought that his dad played a really, not the too tough of a dad, just that you can do a little bit better, sort of the dad to like his son. And I like that, like the way he kind of portrayed everything to his son. Didn't get mad at him. He's always like, you can try this. And like his son reacted to that well, I thought.
Yeah. It was, he had a good parenting style. It was sort of I see your potential. I know you can do better, without it being, sort of putting him down. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and I could see too that at least for me, it felt like the whole movie he knew that his son was going to leave eventually, and he was kind of teaching him the skills that he needed to leave, and I really appreciated that too.
Yeah, I wonder if he like really had an idea that he was sort of out the door, that Austin was out the door there.
Oh, that was my theory. That's my theory, that I think that he saw that his son was going to leave eventually, and he just wanted to teach him. It wasn't even necessarily, in my opinion, I don't think he was even necessarily teaching him skills about being working in the profession. It seemed to be like life skills that every time that just kind of related to profession. It was like a double checking. You should be ready for this. You should be, and they all seem to be like fatherly life skills, or parental life skills that connected to profession as well as the son.
That's true. That's a really good point. I didn't think of it that way, actually. But yeah, even when it was, the smoke inhalation versus, I don't remember what the actual cause of death was, edema or something like that.
Yeah.
It wasn't really about that. It was more about looking more closely and, not just going with the easy way out or what's expected. That's true. It's a good point.
I got a question, because this is kind of came up in like why I noticed it this time around. I feel, do you feel that as your person that reads a lot of horror and you rarely get to watch horror, and as a person that I watch a lot of horror, do you feel that as a parent that you have a different reaction to horror movies now, or horror literature in some certain circumstances?
Yeah, it depends on the specific subject matter. There's some things that I just can't do. I've been wanting to read We Need to Talk About Kevin.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think it's Lionel Shriver is who wrote it. And I can't do it. I can't read it. I also can't watch the adaptation, the movie. Because I have a son, and I don't know. it's things with kids just really get to me. But then I think about something like with the Babadook, where I really enjoyed the sort of child-parent relationship that was part of that movie.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of stuff that's out there that before I would be like, oh, it's just a movie. And now, like you said, it's like it feels really you feel like it on a personal level, which I guess is what they were going for when they were writing it. But I just didn't catch a lot of it when I was in my 20s watching it. Now I'm like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think I don't mind so much like supernatural stuff with kids. Doesn't bother me. That's not a problem. Where the kid themselves is the issue, that's not an issue. That's not a problem for me. It's when people are doing bad things to kids, whether it's bullying situations or abuse situations. Those get to me because those are real. You know? So yeah, I have a hard time with that. That's the only place I get chicken out. I'm not. I haven't found much that has been too far for me. I've read some books that were, you know, like on the extreme end of horror and disturbing, but yeah, it's just kid stuff. It's tricky.
I'm gonna do the opposite of what I often do with everyone. But I'm going to tell you not to watch something as opposed to tell you to watch it. I suggested today because every day I'm doing a horror countdown, and today's horror countdown was the Korean TV series Sweet Home, which is a brilliant creature feature sort of horror television series. It's really good. Have you tried it out? Have you seen it?
I haven't, but I wanted to watch it. Maybe I don't now.
What I'm going to say is that throughout the whole show, and I'm not going to spoil who it happens to, throughout the whole show, it's really a really cool kind of interesting look at like survival and people surviving in kind of locked in a situation. So it feels like a very pandemic based show in a sense of them fighting against this like plague of monsters, and they're locked into one thing, and the whole thing's to stay within the house. So it feels really pandemic in that sense. But there is an aspect of bullying that when you mentioned bullying, I was like, oh yeah, Sweet Home. Sweet Home has an aspect of bullying to one of the characters that's told through flashbacks that no word of a lie was scarier than every single monster situation in there. Like the whole concept of the bullying in there, like this is my like heads up for anyone that's listening that really can't handle watching bullying or don't want to watch bullying, which is fully understandable. The bullying in that was one of the ones that, because I feel that a lot of movies and TV shows, they portray bullying in a way that I'm like, oh, that seems kind of unrealistic. But when they nail it, right? And this is one of the ones that nailed it. And I was like, oh man, that made me feel sad for like a week after. I was like, oh, that doesn't make me feel good. Like it really made me feel like a downer.
Yeah, I'm glad you told me because I probably won't watch it then. Honestly, I couldn't finish The Nutty Professor, Joel, because of when. Yeah, because he gets picked on by the stand-up comic at the club. Couldn't finish it. Couldn't get through that scene. It was pretty bad.
There's certain triggers. That's fully understandable. There's like certain triggers, and like that's bullying's. Yeah, the bullying's a really interesting one because I feel like they portray it a lot in movies, and then a lot of the times the payoff for the person getting bullied, the payoff is just really turning them into a bully. And I'm like, well, you didn't. Weird way to show this.
Yeah, it really, it feels sort of like it's almost like it's like a cheap character development kind of thing. I know that honestly, this might be a little off, but they do that a lot with sexual assault as well for women, particularly in literature. I'm finding lately that, you know, if a woman is going to be strong and independent, it's almost without fail that she's been sexually assaulted or harassed in her past. And I'm like, it's pretty, it's.
That's another thing I have also noticed too. It's tropey and like, again, the split for me. I'm like, it's on one hand, it's offensive. On the other hand, I find it very tropey.
Yeah. And I mean, it's important to present those things and to not pretend that they don't happen, but it just gets a bit, I don't know how to do it properly. I haven't seen it done well yet, so keep an eye out.
This is a mass generalization. By all means, if anyone would like to debate this with me in the comments, please feel free. I feel that when I see a story that has that shows sexual assault in any context or anything to do with the character, I feel that if the director and the writer of the story is written from a woman's perspective, then, or like as the writer or director is a woman as opposed to a man, I feel that jarringly differently use of how it affects the character. So that's one thing I've noticed, even in the horror genre. It's one thing I've noticed on how they portray it, portray sexual assault on screen.
Yeah, no, I think that it would, you'd probably be a decent challenge to find a situation where, when it's a sort of own voices thing, right? Where if a woman is, trying to imagine or present a situation where a woman is being assaulted, and that's something that we, there's no getting around the fact that happens the vast majority to people who identify as female.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to come across differently. That's it. And I can't think of any examples that's not the case. So I would have to agree with you.
The only one, and this is a really gory movie, so I'm not really sure if it's going to be a suggest. I think it was on my list of suggestions because the movie overall, as an entire arc, is very fascinating and is a crazy movie. Is the movie called Revenge? I can't remember the director's name offhand here, but I'll put it in the show notes. But that has sexual assault and then just the whole arc of the character, and that is it's an interesting watch. It's very, very dark, very gory, but I feel that with the concept of what the movie's about, it like revenge in a sense is a lot different than when I saw like The Hills Have Eyes. But either way, the topic itself it's one of those things. That's one of those things for me too. And as far as bullying goes, like that's one of the things for me. I'm not saying the same thing, but that's one of the things for me that if I hear that before I see what the movie's about, then I'm like, I really don't know if I really want to watch the movie because I just find it, like you said, I don't think it really moves anything forward for the character.
Yeah, that's a big one for me, is particularly when I'm reading, I often ask, does the story need this? Does that bit need to be told? But yeah, it's a tricky topic. It's important to have conversations about it. I don't know that there's a right answer for any of these things, but it's good to talk about.
Yeah, and I feel like the genre in itself is it's interesting because, like you said, it's still happening quite a bit in literature. It's still happening quite a bit in film. That there's not really a way that they're not getting better in portrayal. I feel like that having more a diversity of voices out there has been somewhat showing different stories on a lot of different topics, whether it's sexual assault, inequality, racism, whatever the topics are. I feel that there's a lot more interesting voices out there telling more interesting perspectives, but at the same time, there's a lot of the same still coming out, which makes it tough to stomach. And also, absolutely. Do we need it?
There's I recently read, there's a book called Paperbacks from Hell. It's written by Grady Hendrix, who's a phenomenal author. And he really goes into sort of it's the history of pulp horror. So, horror literature throughout the ages. And he really touches on the idea that there's sort of horror tends to go hand in hand with whatever social issues are at the forefront of our mind at the time. So, there was sort of the satanic panic in I think it was the early 90s. And so there was a ton of stuff coming out, like Michelle Remembers and all these books about possession and all this stuff. And then, there was a trend with, there was a lot of books coming out that were sort of like indigenous horror. So it was, these tribes and spells and shamans and all this kind of stuff. And I think that recently something I've been noticing is that there has been more female voiced horror, and there's been a lot more people of color writing and putting out movies. And it's been fantastic. I mean, I'm loving it. But I think that that's certainly evidence that, we have these conversations on a political and social scale. And then it's like we get to decompress with our horror entertainment. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. I just started a book today called Ring Shout, and I can't remember the author off the top of my head, but so far it's these three young ladies. I think they're in the southern states. They're three Black women, and they are hunting monsters, but the monsters are Ku Klux Klan members. So the idea is that like the White Hood is actually this like monster skeleton that we've just modeled a costume after. It's fantastic. I'm loving it.
That sounds amazing. I'm already in. I'll put that in the show notes too.
Yeah, really good.
To your previous book that you mentioned about the kind of like the industry of horror, To complement that, if you enjoyed that book, which I really want to check out, what I'd recommend is there's a documentary, and I think it might be on YouTube. If it is, I'll put it in the show notes. It's called Nightmare in the Red, White, and Blue. And it focuses on American horror. And it focuses on the correlation, exact same correlation you're saying there about based on the panics of whatever it is, the connection to when horror came out. So even as back as early as like the 50s, I think it is, there was a huge boom of monster movies about giant monsters that were affected from the radiation, because there was a huge panic of the atomic bomb. So yeah, so it's like it's an interesting connection. And then they'd had this in the 80s. There was a lot of slashers because there was a big fear of serial killers. So it's kind of like a compliment to the book you're saying there, and I think would be a cool pairing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's why I enjoy horror. Is it's this sort of arena where you can explore things that you shouldn't be thinking and feeling and imagining, right? And yeah, I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this before, but it's like modern, the folklore in sense. It really is. It kind of reminds me of like Grimm's fairy tales, right? And other fairy tales throughout the time, or not fairy tales, but other like stories like that throughout the time. They're all cautionary tales. But what I've liked a lot of in modern horror, which kind of connects to this movie too, is, and I don't know if I'm sick for mentioning this, but I like the bleakness of a lot of modern horror where you're just like, oh, I wonder how they're going to escape. And then it's like, oh, they don't escape. It seems to stick with me. And this is one of those movies too that really stuck with me for that reason. I was like, oh, I wonder how they're going to escape. And then you like you mentioned before, when they was like, oh, there was no storm, nothing else happened. I was like, well, they were never going to escape. There was nothing they could have done.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just it. It was predetermined. She made her mind up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I liked that. Well, and you know what, now that we're kind of talking about that, that's sort of an empowering aspect of this movie, right? Where she's in charge and they didn't change her plan. Things went her way. That's kind of cool.
Really cool. I didn't really think of it like that. That's completely true. Yeah, she was pretty much at this point, like in that movie. I know they said that she was like a witch in her previous life. Like, she was or they were framed for being a witch and such given her power. But it seemed more like she was a goddess, because I'm like, that is goddess-like power. Like she was an unstoppable force.
Yeah, she was something else entirely. That was above and beyond a witch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was interesting. I remember there was a couple things in this movie that I felt like were interesting, sort of little tidbits that were dropped, little crumbs, but then they weren't explored to the extent that they could have been. Like, I know Tommy, the dad, Brian Cox's character, he talks about how they created what they were trying to kill. So they turned her into a witch. The torture gave her power. I was a little not thrown by that, but it sort of caught my attention. And then it didn't really go anywhere. I felt that now I'm curious about that idea.
Yeah, me too. And I'm torn about, hey, maybe explore that in a sequel or leave it as it is so I can always just wonder. I'm really torn with this movie. It really sits on the middle ground for me. I'm like, I would love a sequel, but also if you left this like how it is, I would be okay.
Did you feel like they left it open-ended for a sequel with that little toe twitch at the end there?
Oh yeah, I definitely think they left it open-ended for a sequel, and her going off to the next place kind of feels like she's going to a bigger place. So I don't think they could pull off doing a full-out autopsy for a second movie, though. I feel like the second movie has to be. I would rather a prequel, to be honest. I'd rather to see so we can actually see Olwen Kelly's story, maybe find out like who she was. I would love a prequel movie so we can see like her as an actor, see kind of and it'd be kind of a witchy movie too, which would be fun. You could get in there too.
Always on board. Yeah, I'll never say no to a witchy movie, that's for sure.
Have you seen have we talked about the Fear Street trilogy? Have you seen that?
I haven't seen it. But that was my favorite book series from the Fear Street. when I was young. It was of course I forget what they're called now, but there was a set of 3 of the Fear Street, and they were sort of these prequel setups. And the very first one started with was sort of a witch panic. It wasn't Salem so much; it was almost closer to the setup of like the Crucible.
Okay.
Just, the accusation and the pointed fingers and stuff. But yeah, I loved it. I've been putting off watching them I always do that. When I think I'm really going to enjoy something, I don't watch
it.
I don't know where that comes from.
I could really enjoy this. I'm going to not watch it for a while.
I don't know. Yeah, not sure.
I recommend it.
I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone in that. Like, I know that's, people won't use their favorite craft supplies because they don't want to waste them, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's complete. Yeah, there's definitely been things like I've done that before too. The thing is, I think I would do it a lot more about movies if I wasn't. I'm kind of forced now to watch movies for content reasons. But prior, I'd be like, I'll watch it later. Like, it's funny because I did a guest spot on a internet friends podcast, Hornblood Fire, who's got a podcast coming out soon. Shout out to her. I was a guest spot on her podcast, and we watched this movie called Baskin, which is a Turkish horror film. I put that movie off forever. Like, I was suggested that movie from a friend of mine, Levi, forever ago. And I was like, I guess I'll check it out sooner or later. And I just didn't watch it. Then she asked me a set of, I was asked a set of movies to check out, or which movies would I like to cover on her podcast. And that was one of them. I was like, I've got a reason to watch it. And then checked it out.
Well, honestly, the Autopsy of Jane Doe was on my list for a long time as well. And I wouldn't have watched it unless you had invited me onto your podcast. So thank you, because it made me sit down and watch it, and I loved it.
You're very welcome. I'm really glad you liked it, and I'm again glad you did this.
Yeah. As much as you can nitpick stuff, I really enjoyed that movie. It was great.
Yeah, the bleak ending for me is just like what sold it at the end. I think if they would have gotten away with it's an okay, forgettable movie, but like the fact that like I said earlier, that there was no real escape. I'm like, I love that in a horror movie.
Yeah. There was her leaving. That was definitely one that stood out for me, though. That irked me was her just being uncovered in the back of that transport vehicle. Bothered me. That's not how she would be moved.
Yeah, that was weird. I thought that was weird too. I was like, what? They wouldn't. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. It's just not healthy. It's not safe. Is what it comes down to. Like, whether she's moving or not, it's not a good idea to move someone like that.
Didn't even really seem like she was strapped down too well. Like, it just, everything about that seems like a little weird.
Yeah, that was interesting. Just a few little things, but like we said before, like with the mask, some things are just, the art of cinema is just more important in some cases than correctness, and that's fair.
One fun trivia piece here, I'll tell you before we wrap up, is the cat's name in the movie Sydney, who sadly did not make it in the movie. The cat's real name is Stanley the Cat. And I went to its IMDb page. My favorite piece of trivia from that cat's IMDb page is it just says, is a cat. That's all it says. Trivia from the cat. I was like, oh, okay, I was curious.
They didn't use a body double.
No.
It's actually a cat. That's great.
That's another thing that a lot of people don't like to see in movies is like dead animals, like animals getting killed. And I was like, I'm curious about that actually, because if the girlfriend wasn't really killed, what killed the cat? Why did the cat get killed? Yeah,
fair point. I think that probably is an argument for the whole everything is an illusion idea.
Oh, yeah.
Right, because who knows? She wasn't in the band.
No, and as you know, this is like more. There's always been like a connection between cats and witches, but it's usually like a good connection. No,
I mean every piece of kind of pop culture for sure. They're sort of the familiar, right? Like
yeah,
they're very deeply associated. Cats and witches for sure. Yeah, and he did not like her right from the start.
Oh yeah, he knew. He was a good judge of character.
Yeah, they're smart. Those cats. He was on to her.
All right, Danica, let's just wrap up here. Thank you again so much for coming on the show. I'm not sure if you want to share your social media to the world or if that's a thing you want to do. You can say yes or no.
I'm not very interesting that way. I have a Facebook and an Instagram, and it's all just my pets and my kid. It's not nothing too fascinating. Yeah. No.
Fair enough. My own personal account is actually just It's literally a fan account to my daughter now. It's nothing else. So
Yeah.
I fully get that.
Sometimes I get some food on there. It's not nothing anybody hasn't seen before.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, on my end here, you can find me on Instagram at West Coast Strange, as well as on Facebook West Coast Strange. I will probably be posting a lot more stuff for Halloween and such. And this is probably my third or fourth time saying this, but Danica, I cannot thank you enough for making this episode happen and making one of my podcast goals come true. It truly was one of my podcast goals to have you on the show to talk about this movie. And this was a lot of fun to catch up with you.
Yeah.
And I'm really enjoying continuing to catch up with you through the page. I feel it's like brought our friendship, kind of sparked it back up to have a conversation. So thank you so much.
No, I totally agree. Thank you so much for having me. I hope that I lived up to your expectations.
You sure did.
Yeah. If you want to keep chatting, I've got more, got some more info here if you want to ask questions. I don't know how many details you want in your podcast though. For my
Oh, wait, hold on. Show's not over. What details do you have there?
I have some information about how, like in what instances an autopsy would actually happen.
Oh, please.
Okay. I was just going to share that, like, in my personal experience, the vast majority of people that we were caring for were elderly, but there's an incredible list of instances where someone might be autopsied. Actually, the majority of cases where someone isn't just dying of old age. I don't have my list here, but like in Manitoba, it's anything that's, let's see here, homicide, workplace accident, motor vehicle accident, anyone that's a pedestrian that's in a motor vehicle accident, anyone that's epileptic, anyone that dies of anorexia, sudden infant death syndrome. There's just tons of different situations that I think that people wouldn't necessarily think of. I thought that would be interesting.
It is interesting. So like any of those reasons would just be reasons like look into it further realistically is what would go for the autopsy.
Yeah, exactly. And then like some of the stuff that they didn't get a chance to do for the autopsy, but the things that they dissect or fully remove, it ends up going into what's called a viscera bag. So when we receive them at a funeral home, there's actually like we get the organs as well, but they're not in the body anymore. They're in a bag that is then in the body cavity.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's all. Just some little tidbits I thought might be interesting that were sort of topical.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually have another question based on that. Based on the movie itself here, when they first got with their building and such, is that where they would do an autopsy? And I mean that in a sense of it didn't seem like would their job be to kind of like find out the cause of death for like the cops in that sense too? Or like with what they were doing? Okay. I was just curious about that.
No, that was definitely something that I can't give you 100% answer on that. In my experience, I have never heard of an autopsy happening in a mortuary or funeral home.
That's what I thought was weird. And I wasn't sure about that. My wife brought that up to me. She was like, no, that's not, that might not be like how it's done. I was like, I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure.
I can't say, I wouldn't say 100% no, that never ever would happen, but I really have never heard of that. That's two very separate things.
Could the argument be that it was in a smaller town, but you did this you did embalming in I'm assuming in a small town. So like, that's not a really good argument in that sense, right?
No, not really. I mean, I can't imagine a situation where it would be happening in the same place. I mean, that's a lot of training. People who perform autopsies are doctors. They're, they have I believe in a lot of cases they have a PhD, like they're a doctor. And I certainly was not. So, that's a lot of like, cremation and embalming. That's a lot of work for somebody with that training to be doing. It's a lot of time for them to spend on something that doesn't need to be done by someone with those credentials. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I kind of felt that when I was watching the movie, the only like credit well, here's the question. How familiar or how did you deal with like the same cops each time? Like No,
I never had I didn't, in my experience, ever have any contact with the RCMP.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. But so I mean, I've been curious about what it would take to become like a coroner's assistant or a medical examiner's assistant, but to be a coroner or medical examiner, I mean, that's years and years of university. That's, it's a very prestigious education, really.
Yeah, so that is definitely something I was wondering about in this movie. I was like, it feels like they shouldn't be doing this in the first place, but yeah.
Yeah. No, that was definitely that was something that stood out to me too. But yeah, and I tried to get a firm answer, and I didn't find anything that would make me feel confident enough to say absolutely yes or absolutely no. But I would think, no, that's not the situation.
That's kind of what I thought too. I appreciate you looking into that though, all the same, because I was a little confused. I was like, maybe it's because they're in a small town. I'm like, I feel like that's still not correct.
Yeah. I've never heard of it. Oh. I'll ask my old friends. I'll see if they've ever come across it.
Please get back to me on that too, because I'd like to know, because that part felt like a little weird. All right, Danica, thank you for that extra little bit there. I really appreciate it, because I really want to know more about the movie. So thank you, and please come on the show again. We'll find another movie to go over. Maybe if you finish The Fear Streets, we can do that, or like do something. Or if you watch The Wretched, I'd like to do that. By all means, I would love you to come back on the show. This is an open invitation anytime you're free.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And for everyone else, I will talk to you guys soon, probably on here, or if not there, you know where to find me on social media. Thank you, everyone. And thanks again, Danica. I'll talk to you guys all later. Bye.